Yeah, so corals are these animals that live in this wonderful symbiotic relationship with these microalgae, and these algae are what provide the corals with 90% of their food. When corals bleach, it's effectively just a stress response where the symbiosis breaks down and the corals release majority of these algal cells, and what you see is the white calcium carbonate skeleton coming through the tissues rather than the brown algae coming through the tissues. During this 2016 summer, the corals bleached on the Great Barrier Reef for the worst bleaching they've had in recorded history, and the upper third of the reef, as you said, is the bit that bleached much worse than the lower half of the reef. Majority of this coral bleaching is due to elevated temperature stress, but the southern half of the reef was spared because of the large tropical cyclone Winston that hit Fiji, brought bad weather across to the sort of southern half of the reef, which cooled some of the temperatures down, whereas in the north there was no bad weather, and so the calm, still conditions prevailed and the temperatures just went up and up and up. Fertilizer runoff as well as sand and sort of pesticides rush right into the inshore Great Barrier Reef, which declines the water quality. So the sediment obviously cuts off the light levels, increases turbidity, which reduces the light for the photosynthesis for those algae to give the corals their food. The fertilizers provide a whole lot of nitrogen and phosphorus into the inshore Great Barrier Reef, which makes it more beneficial for algae. The other thing that we're noticing is that these increase in nutrients from the fertilizers are helping the little baby crown of thorn starfish grow up to become big crown of thorn starfish, whereas traditionally before we had these land use and runoff issues, most of those baby crown of thorn starfish wouldn't have been able to grow up to become big ones, and so we're seeing sort of explosions of crown of thorns going back onto the reefs and causing significant damage on the reefs where you find them. Coral bleaching is not a great thing for corals. Why? It may look beautiful when the corals turn white. It is basically one of the first signs that an ecosystem is in peril. And coral bleaching is a relatively new phenomenon. We saw it for the first time in the early 1980s, but the first global bleaching event was recorded in 1998, and this was the first time where corals all around the world bleached sort of back to back. During that year we lost 16% of coral reefs. We're sitting now in 2016 in the midst of the third global bleaching event. By all accounts, this time it seems much worse than 1998, so we effectively may lose more than 16% of the corals. Obviously, that's not great for the corals, because the corals are the reef builders. They provide the underwater cities for all the animals, other animals to live in, so they've created these wonderful ecosystems and provide the homes that supports the diversity that we see. The other thing is that about 500 million people in this world rely on coral reefs for their food and livelihood, and so if we start getting a decline in the corals, we'll start to lose some of the smaller fish, we'll start to lose some of the bigger fish, and then we'll start to see, I guess, a lot of people having nutritional deficiencies. If we as humans hadn't been around, the corals would probably have been fine. But healthy coral is the ones, if you go out and snorkel, you will see that they're nice and brown and green. That's because they've got healthy populations of these algae living inside their tissues. As we said with bleaching, that's a stress response where they release those. But if the corals are living in nice clear waters with relatively warm temperatures and high sort of light conditions, they'll be doing fine. The issues come where we as humans have come in and sort of tipped that little natural balance, and we're starting to see declines. Coral bleaching is probably the major one facing us now, because if the sea temperatures keep rising, we keep getting these strong El Niños, we're going to keep getting these double whammies where we'll start to see coral bleaching happening more frequently. And if corals don't have enough time to recover between the next disturbance, well then you can see what will happen. You'll have this continued negative decline. There's a number of things we can do. In the short term, looking after some of the more localized effects, like improving water quality, not throwing anchors overboard and damaging corals, not standing and kicking on corals. So having good diving and snorkeling practices is something you can do as an individual. But if we're going to be serious about saving the Great Barrier Reef and coral reefs in general, we really need to take direct action on climate change. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We're currently sitting at 409 parts per million, and if we keep going as business as usual, it's likely we'll see a significant change in coral reefs around the world in our lifetimes. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park is one of the best managed marine protected areas in the world. The marine park was established in 1975, and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority has been the custodian of that reef ever since. In 1981, the Great Barrier Reef became a World Heritage Area, which gives increased, responsibility to the Australian government to be the custodian of this reef for the international community. Now, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority generally have been doing a really good job. As marine park managers, you have control to basically turn taps on and off of things that you have control over. So you can regulate fishing, you can try and address water quality, you can put mooring buoys in to stop people anchoring, you can reduce effort, where people can dive, where people can fish, etc. The challenge facing the Marine Park Authority, and I guess resource managers in general as we move forward, is climate change. If we don't address our carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions, no matter what we do locally, it's going to it's not going to be that useful, for want of a better word. Now, the Australian government were put on notice by the World Heritage Committee a few years ago, based on sort of coastal development in the Gladstone area, where they hadn't disclosed it to the World Heritage Committee, and so the World Heritage Committee put them on notice to potentially put the reef as a World Heritage Area in danger. Following that, the Australian government has gone and did a strategic assessment and come up with the Reef 2050 long-term sustainability plan, which is a good start to address some of these issues, and it's a 35-year plan of a number of actions and targets that they will do to help increase or maintain the health of the Great Barrier Reef. Majority of those is targeted on water quality, and this is where the politics comes in, because the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority and the scientists come out and said that climate change is the greatest long-term threat to the reef. But in this document, climate change is only mentioned in the introduction, and all the actions and targets are addressing these sort of immediate local threats like water quality, which is important because if we can take these stresses away, it gives the corals the best chance as they move forward with these increased temperatures. But if we're not going to do anything to keep those temperatures at bay, well then we might have really good water quality and not so many corals left by 2050.